Hello, and welcome to another contemplation on the Aries North Node. I feel a little full, and I'm not even going to guess at this point in the process of what this is going to be, so I'm not going to have some fancy intro here for you. But I do wonder, as we are a little over a month into this Aries North Node transit at the time I'm recording this on August 17th, 2023, I do wonder, which have you noticed the influence of more? Would you say the Aries North Node or the Libra South Node? And clearly it's an axis, so they're both happening simultaneously, but in my experience, I'm having kind of like waves of Aries North Node expansion. Hello, Babo. And then there will be waves of Libra South Node processing and like having stuff come to the surface and being able to see patterns in relationships and asking myself questions about you want that? You can't have. We already talked about this. We did a talk and you agreed you wasn't gonna mess with, and then you didn't keep it, so we have put you on a 4. See, that's bad. No. Just go on, Papa. Oh my gosh. Well, so the current wave of Libra South Node that I'm facing, which for me personally, I feel like right off the bat, it was a lot of like a burst of fire. Like my anger started rising. My irritation level was like right on up there. And how I interpret that is like the Libra South Node is bringing the patterns that irritate us to the surface. And then the Aries North Node is a burst of fire, a burst of awareness of what you desire, which makes you even like the gap between what you desire and what's really happening, like even more pronounced. And then anger is a natural response of the ego when we personally are not getting what we want. And so I think it's a very natural experience to be a little bit more irritable, possibly during this transit, and that we should absolutely be listening to our anger. Like, what is it telling us? What's it pointing at as far as, no, not this? This is how I want it to be. And that's the wave of Libra South Node. So like getting into that, like that's the wave of Libra South Node that I'm feeling right now is like we basically get to have whatever we desire. The book I was telling you guys about, What You Think of Me Is None of My Business by Terry Cole Whitaker. In the beginning of that book, she explains that, you know, there's a lot out there about God's will and like what is God's will. And she takes a stab at it and says, God's will is that you personally have everything you desire. That's God's will. And Terry Cole Whitaker is an Aries South Node and an Aries Saturn, which is just a couple degrees away from her Aries South Node. And so I feel like that wisdom of Aries energy, like we burn with our unique desires for a reason. And the energy that comes from desiring what you desire and the pursuit of it is inextricably linked with us living our own path of spiritual evolution that we came here to live. Our desires are an integral component for what it is that we came here to do. Our desires being fulfilled are pretty often at the core of us living like our greatest contribution to the collective, or so I believe. And this whole idea of not settling in relationship, basically, to look at the patterns that are emerging in your relationship, and if they're pissing you off, if you find yourself like, this isn't right and this isn't right, and like all the things are wrong, I do think that there's something to be said about spending some time basically like in a designer space of like, okay, so everything that is wrong with whatever relationship it is, that could be like your spouse, yes, but it could be your parent, it could be your business partner, it could be your friend. Like there can be relationship dynamics playing out between you and any other person that you ever come into contact with. So in the designer space, we get to have it wherever, however, whenever we want it to be. However we want it to be. It is for us to get to design the relationship that we personally would like to participate in. And then it is within our power to say no to everything that's not that. And I've been thinking about this a lot, this concept of saying no to things, and how crucial it is to be a healthy, whole, integrated person. Like, in order to do that, you have to learn how to say no to what does not match you. There's one of the gene keys, number 12, the city, like the top frequency of the gene key is purity, and the gift is discrimination. And discrimination has a really nasty context in the US culture as far as like, you know, segregation and discrimination and racism, and like these things really go hand in hand. And I mean, you can discriminate based on all kinds of things, and like we have laws to prevent that. Like we actively do not reward discrimination as a concept. And yet in gene key number 12, the gift of like, how do you get to purity? You discriminate. Chew on that for a second, because it makes so much sense. And it comes back to this idea of saying no to what doesn't match what you desire. And there's, I feel like, so much of a rabbit hole that we could go in here as far as like, do you believe, well, before you even get to that, number one, do you know what you desire? Because in my own journey, there have definitely been times where I'm like, absolutely not. I have no clue. So I'm going to take what shows up, and then I'm going to do some recon on like, how much of this am I liking? How much of this am I not liking? And I'm going to store those notes in my little, journal of study over here on the side. And over time, I became familiar with what it is that I personally desire. And once I knew what I desired, then that begins sometimes a decades-long process of, okay, so are you going to let yourself have it then? Do you believe that you deserve to fulfill that desire? Do you believe that you personally have what it takes to participate in that fulfilled desire? Like, these are deep questions, and sometimes the answer is no. Like, probably the best example of this is I realized that I was sexually attracted to women when I was about 5 years old. And I had my first woman-to-woman sexual experience in my early 30s. Long after I had all kinds of other experiences, but all heterosexual ones. And I even moved away to a city where I knew that I would get to pursue that desire because I'll be anonymous. I'll be like in a big city where there's millions of people. Nobody knows who I am. I can do whatever I want. I can go to the gay bar. I can meet whoever I want. Like, no big deal. And I never did it. The anonymity of no one even knows you, I still didn't do it. I just didn't. It felt far away from me and where I was and what I could access. And I think there's a lot to be said for the timing of fulfilling our desires, and how, let's say Like in that example, it was like nearly 30 years between recognizing, okay, this is what I desire, and then here, fulfill this desire. Like 30 years, I feel like that's a long time, and it doesn't have to take that long. Obviously, you can close that gap as much as you possibly want. And that's the point of those questions of like, do you believe you can have what you desire? And I think a lot of the settling that ends up happening in relationships, again, any kind of relationship, doesn't have to just be your romantic partner, our friends, the people we hang out with at work, the connections in our family, like basically any of the people in our lives, when we settle for behavior that does not sit well with us, when we settle for spending time with people who have fundamentally different values, or people who don't trust us, or people who don't respect us, or people who abuse us even, like when we choose to settle, I genuinely believe it's because, number one, either it's not settling because you don't even know what your desire is in the first place. Been there, and been in plenty of relationships that taught me what I desire, and I didn't know that going in there. And then I learned, thank you so much. So number one, you didn't really settle because you didn't know what you desired yet. And that's okay. That's part of the process. Pre-desire is part of the process, possibly. A lot of us got our desires stamped out in childhood where we were taught to behave. We weren't given free rein to just go chase our desires and what is it that you deeply want? And let's figure out how to get you there. And most of us didn't grow up in that childhood. Most of us were taught obedience. And so if all you know how to do is obey, knowing what you desire is the opposite of that, knowing how to be an individual, knowing how to follow your spark of life force energy. Yeah, what does it want? And not knowing that is a sign of that Libra South Node conditioning where we were taught who we were supposed to be. And so when we recognize that we're stuck in a loop of being who we think we're supposed to be, that's a great time to kind of zoom out a little bit from the exact relationship you're thinking about or working on, again, whether that's your parent or your spouse or whatever. Set that specific relationship aside, and instead, let's say it's your spouse, instead come back to a place where it's only you and your desire. It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what they're doing, it doesn't matter how they treat you or don't treat you. Leave them out of the equation for just a second and come into your desire. And what is it that you know? What do you know you desire? What do you know you prefer? And notice, I'm not asking you, what is it that you don't want, right? That would be the conversation where we're going to go get them and we're going to point out all their flaws and you shouldn't be like this and you should be doing this differently. And nope, leave them over there, out of the picture, out of the equation for just a short time, just for the exercise of what would it look like? Oh, this is really, really yummy. What would it look like for your primary relationship to be with your own desire? What would it look like if your ultimate pledge of fidelity and faithfulness was to your own desire? Maybe. I don't know. What do you think? I'm personally living this currently, where so I haven't talked about this publicly on the channel, but I recently uncoupled from my partner of 4 years, and we redefined our relationship out of a romantic context, is why I say uncoupled. We still very much are soul family, essentially, and we both know that and are going to continue to live as soul family. But we are no longer a couple because I have these desires, she has these desires, and we basically redefined our relationship where we are both 100% free to live our desires. And that doesn't include her moving out. So yeah, like we can have whatever we want. And now that I have found the truth of my desire, I have allowed myself to accept the truth of my desire and be willing to open up the space in my life for what I desire to come in. I feel like this is that place where, you know, so often we will hang on to what we have and say, show me the better thing, and then I'll like jump over there, and you know, in the jumping over there, I'll let go of the thing I have now. And I've done it multiple times. And so I'm not talking from like a high horse of you shouldn't do that, that's wrong. I'm talking from a place of I've done that multiple times where I left this relationship because of this relationship. And this time I felt really strongly that for my own integrity, for my own self-respect, that it was important to me to create the space for what I desire before the desire has like materialized and fulfilled itself. Like I don't need to cling to her like a life preserver. I can let her go. And if that means that she wants to leave, that's her choice. I can't control that. In this situation, it ended up that like that's not what she wants, and basically we already wanted the same thing, we just weren't talking about it. And so me being willing to say, here's what's true about a desire that I have that's taking me this way, and her to be like, yeah, like these are my desires and they're going in a different way, but we do still have this shared foundation. Like we can redefine this relationship so that it can be exactly what I want it to be, and it can be exactly what she wants it to be. And we can both be independent actors in our lives. And so the act of releasing what's not working is one of those things that like the Aries North Node courage is really helpful, as far as like, it's really scary when we identify with a relationship, or, you know, it's taken up a big part of our lives, or, you know, whatever the case is. It can be really difficult to justify letting go of something that's basically okay. You know, like I've been in that situation a lot, where the relationship has a lot going for it, but if I'm being totally honest about what I desire and what my preference is, then yeah, it's like maybe a solid 50 or 60% and of like matching up with me. And is that enough? And that's a personal call. There is no right or wrong answer to that, because back in the day when I had no clue what my desires were, what my preferences were, or I did know some of them, but I wasn't even letting myself have them. Back in the day, I was a match for only having a little bit of my desire fulfilled, because I didn't even really know what I was missing. Like looking back on those relationships now, I can see that they were like 10, 20% matching up with my desire. But at the time, it matched like the one desire that I had, which was to not be alone. It had that going for it. And that's a lot, you know, because I don't want to be alone. And so, yeah, like that was, at the time, a 10% match was awesome. It was like, great, sold. What do you want to do next? Where are we going? I was down for that relationship. And now, you know, like after having all kinds of those relationships where it was like partial matches in this way, and then the next one would be like this but wouldn't have that thing, and then the next one would be like this but wouldn't have these two things, and it's like all of that was necessary, I think. I'm seeing like the mad science guys where they like built the perfect woman and they like, you know, all of that. But like energetically, you know, to like design the exact relationship that you want. And I think in order to really live that, at least the part of the process that I'm on right now is to be in, like, my primary relationship is with my own desire. I'm discovering my relationship through my own desire. Every time I say that, it like sinks in a little bit more. It feels so good and so right to think like my designer relationship has nothing to do with another person. Like, what? Like, how does that work? How does that? Of course, a relationship includes another person. And it's like, kind of, but, you know, depending on what you believe about the nature of this reality, life is a reflection of us. You know, your life is a reflection of you. So before we go, you know, really trying to change the other person, it's like, again, take them out of the equation and look inside of ourselves, and not what we don't want, not picking apart them, but looking at what you do want. You know, what have you learned is really important to you? What have you learned is like a tingling, aliveness feeling that like you value that feeling, you prioritize that feeling, you desire to fulfill that feeling in your experience. Like, will you let yourself have what it is that you desire? And I resonate with the answer being yes sometimes and the answer being no sometimes. You know, like that journey along the way of discovering what our desires are and granting ourselves access to them. Like, this is Aries North Node territory for sure. That Libra South Node is very much representative of what we were taught relationships should be. So like the archetype of relationship when you were born, right? Like my grandma who came in the 30s, like she has a very different construct of like the right way to be in relationship. And I mean that across the board. But again, if we take the example of like marriage or like primary spouse or primary partner, the way that people thought about the primary partnership, the life partner, she has a very different idea. Like, I mean, shotgun wedding kind of style, as far as like, if you're pregnant, then you have to get married, you know, and that's just like the way it was. That's just the rule. And so there you go. That's what they did. And so to have that version of relationship versus I was born in the 80s, which was after divorce started really being a thing. And I saw a very different landscape where lots of my classmates' parents were divorced. Like, that was just a thing that happens sometimes, is that marriages don't last forever. Like, that was common knowledge to me. And then later, I started to see a lot of examples of people who weren't married. And then later, I started to see a lot of examples of people who had a primary partner, but then also had other partners. Like, as I lived my life on this planet, yes, there was the version of relationship, which was still primarily based in marriage when I got here. But as I've grown, as I've lived on the planet for 35 years, I've also developed my own, again, very bespoke version of what my ideal primary partnership looks like. And let me tell you what, it ain't the 1980s version, and it definitely isn't the 1930s version. So we're meant to evolve the way we live on this planet, the way we exist on this planet. Like, we can't help but evolve. And we're meant to be in connection with each other. So again, it's like we're meant to evolve the way we relate to each other, the function the relationship even serves on this planet. So I think, you know, being in primary relationship with our own desires, starting from square one with not trying to fix the relationship you're in or impose your ideal relationship onto another person. I'm saying take any other person out of the equation and instead be in relationship between you and your own desire and the gap between those two things. The mystery on the desire side and the gap between who you consciously are today and all of the desires that you've uncovered. How much of it are you living? And so we cannot make anybody else be different. We can't make anybody else change, but we can anchor so strongly into what we desire and work through the layers of sovereignty, inhabiting sovereignty that's required for us to grant ourselves access to what it is that we desire, to go against the programming of that we were born into and instead do something different. Even though that could weird people out, they could get mad, they could cut you off, they could ostracize you, they could say mean things about you, they can damage your reputation, they can do all of these things. They have freedom of speech just like we do. They have freedom of whatever they want to do with their lives just like we do. But we don't have to stay small and stay in the box because they're uncomfortable. Like the sovereignty, the autonomy, the self-empowerment that's required to give yourself access to what you desire is no small thing. It can take a lifetime to work towards being able to let yourself have what you want, right? And so I am so excited, as always, to be sharing this space with you, to be sharing this journey with you as we travel under the Aries North Node, the Libra South Node, as we become clearer on what it is that we personally desire and what's not that. As we get really, really, really rock solid clear on what we desire and we believe wholeheartedly that we deserve it and should be living it, it gets really easy to look at something and say, not that. Not that. I need the open space because that's not what I want. And you're taking up space from what it is that I do want coming into my life. So you need to get over here into a more authentic place where our relationship can reflect who we each are today. And then the space is open for me to fill in with whatever it is that I desire. And I can tell you from my past experiences that it's a process. It's absolutely a process. And as much as we can be in the designer space of designing tailor-made relationship, right? Like even going through all the different kinds of relationship, like this is the ideal version of friendship in my desire. This is the ideal version of romantic partnership in my desire. This is the ideal version of a work relationship in my desire. Like whatever the primary relation, a parenting-child relationship, like whatever the primary relationships are in your life that take up the most of your time, again, take everybody else out of the equation, come back into what is it that you desire. Focus into making that as detailed as possible. And once it's fully detailed, ask yourself, do you really believe you can have it? And all the work we ever need to do is right there in that question. It has nothing to do with our partner, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're saying to us, what they're not saying to us. They are irrelevant. All that their job is to show you, is this what you desire? And sometimes the relationship is there to show you the opposite of what you desire. And we stay for a long time in that place trying to make them be the thing that we desire. And it just doesn't work like that. It's an attractive realm. The 3D is an attraction field. So our life is really just a reflection of us. And so if our relationship, our friendship, our partnership, whatever it is not what we want it to be, the work is inside. What do you desire, and do you really believe you can have that? Do you believe that you deserve to live this no matter what? Because often the people in our lives do not wish to be what we desire. And in order for us to live the life of what we most desire, it means saying no. It means leaving some people behind because they want something different. the authenticity of their desire is different from ours. And so there are separations that are inevitable. The Libra South Node, I haven't said this publicly, but I see the dissolution of many relationships, and at a minimum, every relationship will have to go through a rebirth. Every relationship will either separate and be over, or will enter a new era of itself, like my uncoupling with my 4-year partner and redefining us as soul family. That this is the new era of our relationship where we are each other's soul family. We are doing life together as family on purpose. So choosing that is the new era of that one particular relationship, but it is my prediction that every single connection, every single relationship will evolve or die. And I don't mean that to be harsh. I am only telling you what I see, as I will continue to do here on Owning Authenticity. I absolutely love this space. I love that you are here. If you've enjoyed this video, do take a second to give it a thumbs up. I would love to hear your thoughts down below on how this Aries North Node transit is doing for you, how it's going. Also, that question from the very beginning of like, have you felt more Aries North Node inspired or more Libra South Node inspired? Just curious. For me, it seems to oscillate. Subscribe to the channel if you're into North Node content and authenticity in general. I'll be back soon with another video, and until next time, do take such good care of yourselves and your beautiful desires. And so will I.